Hi everyone, and welcome back to this channel devoted for the experts in law compliance and technology. My name is Tony. I'm Chief Legal Officer at Sumsub, and today we are at ICE conference in Barcelona. And with me is our expert, Joseph Borg, seasoned professional in the area of gaming, regulation of gaming. You have a fantastic experience with regulating Malta gaming industry, and now Joseph is working together with in basically WH Partners as a partner and advising UAE.
So I've been in the gaming industry for almost 19 years now. In fact, this is probably my 17th or 18th ICE because we missed one because of COVID, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So I get confused on the numbers. But yes, so I was Chief Regulatory Officer at the Malta Gaming Authority till 2013, and then in 2013 I moved to WH Partners, where I became eventually a partner. And my areas of focus are gambling and fintech. It started obviously mostly with gambling, and that's where I have been advising a lot of clients to get licenses in Malta originally. Then obviously I kept on developing and started also advising clients on a more international scale. And in 2016, 17, I started the fintech practice within WH Partners, and now focus a lot also on crypto and EMIs, PSPs, and so on. Always regulatory. In terms of gaming, I'm not doing much gaming in Malta anymore. There are other people within WH that take care of that, but I'm focusing a lot on the UAE. As 2 years ago, we opened an office in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai, and now I'm focusing a lot on gambling there, while in Malta, I'm focusing more on fintech and financial services.
Right. Let's then start with Malta, since since kind of like it is mentioned already. So you used to regulate Maltese gaming industry with the Malta Gaming Authority. Malta is very well known as the country that issues licenses for gaming and serves a huge industry of online gaming, offline gaming. Almost 56% of the population of Malta, they are actually engaged in gaming industries.
I believe that Malta changed the gaming industry. So when I got to the gaming authority in 2007, I remember many European countries, let alone US, saying that online gaming should not be allowed. Online gaming is something that should be banned. I believe there was also a statement by the Gaming Regulators European Forum, GREF, that said like online gambling should be banned. And Malta was the one saying, look, you can't ban it. It's online. People will find a way how to play if they want to play. And people do want to play, so there's no point in actually restricting them. Rather, you need to make sure that this industry is properly regulated. And Malta was the first country to properly regulate this industry in a way that started instilling certain concepts of responsible gaming and so on. Of course, at the time, if you compare the levels of responsible gaming in 2007 with what we have today, there was a big evolution. At the time, it was very basic. So self-barring, but we already had inserted certain things in the law at the time, which today have been amplified. So the seed was sown. It also allowed operators to grow internationally as well. And also thanks to a lot of legal work in terms of fighting out certain laws and fighting out certain policies at European Court of Justice level and so on, helped the industry to become what it is today. So I think Malta has a central role in that. Thanks to that also, Malta is seen as a base. So forget all about licensing. So there are companies that are based in Malta that do not use a Maltese license in their operations, but rather get licenses from all over, say, like in all European states that regulate gambling and so on. But their base would be Malta. So you'll see all the head offices of the big gaming companies, or at least sub head offices, that are in Malta, and that is extremely interesting, which created a massive ecosystem. And yes, that got us to a situation where I believe that at least 56%, you mentioned the figure of 56%, at least 56%, at least indirectly, benefit from this industry in Malta, because you have the rental industry, so people renting apartments to expats that come to live in Malta. You have the restaurants, you have the entertainment industry, you have a lot of service providers, lawyers, accountants. So it's a whole ecosystem now. And the good thing for the industry is that all these people now have 18 years plus experience of dealing with gambling companies.
Yeah, this is something.
Especially when it comes to professionals, you have expertise there.
Yeah, obviously you cannot just replace with something else when you have such seasoned professionals who all work in Malta, live in Malta, and yeah, it's a huge industry. Also, as far as I understand, Malta was kind of like the introducer of the idea that you can have some kind of a global license for different countries. So, for example, when you serve different audiences, including inside Europe, outside Europe, instead of just having like many licenses that are sometimes just non-existent in the countries, you can just take this license in Malta, and everybody is more or less happy with this because everybody knows that this is a good standard.
In the beginning, it was possible to do that because most countries didn't have proper regulations. So at the time, most countries had regulations that were too old and did not cater for online gambling, and therefore that made it possible for operators to operate from Malta all over the world legally. Slowly, and also unfortunately, thanks to some decisions at political level, but also at European Court of Justice level, and more countries started creating national authorization regimes that required operators to get a license in those jurisdictions. Most operators kept using Malta as their base to obtain these licenses, but still obviously couldn't use the one license concept. The disadvantage of that is simply that smaller operators are finding it harder to get into the market. So unless, if you ask a big company to get 6 or 7 licenses, that is something that is doable for them because it's easy for them to invest in getting the right amount of compliance people, the right amount of experts in those jurisdictions to comply with the relevant regulations. Obviously, if you go on a startup, they can't possibly start with such a big compliance team. So what happened is that the big ones started eating up the smaller ones. So you'd have a niche operator, a smaller niche operator that does well in something, and then it's bought out by one of the bigger ones, which is a bit unfortunate in my view. As a romantic of the industry, I'd rather see smaller operators challenge bigger ones than smaller operators just starting up with the aim of being sold. So today, when you create a startup, your aim is to sell it to someone. So you want to do well something and catch the attention of the bigger operators in order to get sold to these big operators. That is not what I would like to see. I would like to see a small operator become a big operator and challenge the other bigger operators. So that would be ideal. Unfortunately, in today's system, it is very difficult to see unless they come with a substantial amount of investment behind coming from big VCs and so on. It is very unlikely that small operator challenging bigger ones.
Some involvement of venture capital in
Well, yes, it's becoming more and more common actually. But usually they would never really go for a complete startup. So we're seeing more, let's say, established operators getting investment, but yes, we will still find some startups, some VCs investing in startups. Again, it is very difficult for the investment to be substantial enough for those operators to become a standalone big operator. The aim would still be to sell off to a bigger one.
Of course, people who are starting a business like that, they're thinking about different licenses. They have a lot of information just coming on their heads from the internet about different kinds of licenses that are existing. For example, it's not only Malta, it's also Curacao, which is kind of like a mention.
It's a completely different. So Malta was very, very popular with those that were aiming at targeting the European Union. Of course, with other jurisdictions becoming more and more profitable outside of Europe, particularly in Asia and in South America, we saw also a big growth in some other jurisdictions like Curacao. Curacao right now is passing through some changes, so there's a bit of uncertainty there. So many operators started looking elsewhere, and two new jurisdictions emerged, particularly Anjouan and Kahnawake. Kahnawake is autonomous tribe in Canada.
There's also, I also heard Kahnawake.
Well, Kahnawake is a historical jurisdiction in the sense that it was very, very popular in the late 2000s. Nowadays, it's a bit less popular, well, quite less popular, because it didn't really update its regulations in a way to remain attractive to operators, while Kahnawake has emerged as a more modern jurisdiction. Then you have Anjouan, which is an island in Comoros. At the end of the day, again, it's an alternative to Curacao, especially because of the uncertainty that was created in Curacao with the new regulations that were passing, not passing. Finally, it seems they passed. And there's a new framework now, but this framework is a bit more expensive than startups would like. So we're seeing quite a shift to Anjouan and Kahnawake. And again, they are in two very different and distinct geographic positions, and they are becoming very popular also depending where you would like to attract business. I cannot compare which one is better and which one is worse. One would have to analyze properly their business model and see where to go. There are advantages and disadvantages with both. Of course, there are limitations because these are offshore jurisdictions, which is very different from what historically Malta, Gibraltar, and Isle of Man offered, because they were considered at least part of Europe in some way or another, and part of the UK. So there was always that advantage that you are in a jurisdiction that is a bit more stable, maybe, and also a jurisdiction that allows you to do things more in line with other economies. So even in terms of banking, in terms of
Yeah, I think the main problem is banking, obviously.
definitely, when you're dealing with gray markets, it's always an issue. And nowadays, with AML becoming so strict, AML laws becoming so strict, it's becoming an even bigger issue. But the industry is still surviving and still thriving, I would say.
If you get the license from Anjouan, for example, you still have a chance, for example, to find a bank that would serve you. It's
Definitely, there are solutions for everything. There are solutions.
EMIs or
EMIs mostly, but some banks also do. But ultimately, nowadays, EMIs are offering exactly the same services of banks, if not better in some.
So, and in terms of costs, for example, I think people who would watch the video, they would be happy to know at least some estimates.
It's very difficult to throw estimates like that because it also depends on a number of factors. But I think they're all very manageable in terms of obtaining the license and getting the necessary advice and the necessary guidance. I think the biggest expense for startups is marketing. because there's a big competition, and in order to establish yourself, so marketing and obviously the development of certain things. So most operators nowadays don't develop their own games, so they rely on third-party providers to and use their games. Then the front end part and the customer service part could be handled by them, and in that case there could be the difference between one operator and another, but also it also boils down a lot to marketing.
I think here it's important to mention that there's a big role in the industry, which is taken by the so-called platforms, such as, for example, SoftSwiss and Bets and whatever. Especially those that basically they provide you the games, they provide you the necessary infrastructure, they even provide you marketing.
In some cases, they also provide you the license, in the sense that sometimes we have situations where some operators are actually operating as white labels on these operators. So everything that is regulatory related would be done by the actual platform. And I wouldn't like to mention names of companies, of course, but there are quite a few that will offer you the whole solution, and all you need to focus on is marketing. The rest is done by them. So that is very interesting also for startups to be able to start up in that way. And the nice thing about it is that these platforms usually have licenses all over the world. So you're not even operating in a dark gray area, but rather you are operating legally in most jurisdictions, which is a good solution for a startup. Of course, as you grow, it doesn't make sense anymore to do that. So you would need to see how to evolve into something more standalone, and they would still keep on using the software of these third-party providers, and now have aggregators, of course, that bring together the software from many different software providers, which gives also another opportunities for these smaller operators to be able to provide a better product for their customers. But at the same time, you would still be managing your own self, and you would be dealing with payments yourself, you would be dealing with regulatory matters yourself, compliance matters yourself. So that would allow you to also become sort of a part of the big boys club and be able to become a fully fledged operator. Then as they grow, obviously they would need to become more and more independent to grow their margins, because as long as you're dependent on these platforms, your margins will always be lower.
Obviously, the most lucrative markets right now, they are getting their own regulation, as you mentioned. Certain countries such as UK, Germany, and Austria, Sweden, they're trying to,
Outside of Europe, Brazil
now, yes, just quite recently, and so they're trying to protect their customers, their audience, to control the access to their audience. How the smaller operators can kind of like manage their risks in terms of getting access. Obviously, it's internet. So
nowadays, even enforcement is becoming more and more sophisticated, and you wouldn't want to be in a situation where you're in breach of certain laws, because it could have a massive impact, or even personally, on the people behind the company. So operators should be guided by professionals and manage their risk accordingly. Now, there's no business in life if you don't take certain risks. We all understand that, and certain risks have to be taken. Fully aware of where the red lines are, let's call it that way. So unless you are aware where the red lines are, you are playing with fire, and it's not advisable.
So this means by red lines, we mean, for example, direct targeted
Targeting campaigns, in some jurisdictions also the use of the language of that jurisdiction. So all of these things have to be assessed properly and in a very professional way. The ideal solution would be to rely on a platform that is licensed in various jurisdictions so that you can at least sleep more peacefully at night.
For example, if a client comes to you and says, I want to try to work for example, the United States, what would be your advice? I mean, there are 50 states, they have, their own regulation.
Two disclaimers: I'm not giving legal advice here, and another disclaimer is I'm definitely far from being an expert on US laws. But definitely the first thing I would do is put them in touch with a professional lawyer in the United States and get the necessary advice from the lawyer. In some cases, they might need to speak to more than one lawyer because, as we know, the United States is not one country. It is 50 different states. At the end of the day, each state has its own rules and regulations. And there are some states that are a bit stricter, some states that are less strict. But definitely, when it comes to the US, it's one of those places where I would tread with extra caution.
Some certain things related to regulation take a lot of attention right now, especially things like responsible gaming. In the UK, for example, there's certain level of jurisprudence of the UK Gambling Commission on what exactly to do, not what not to do. The specific cases when companies were fined for having no controls on, for example, that a person is losing too much money, having very low payable salary, etc., etc. In Malta, there is also, as far as I understand, some collection of cases where
There is, but at the end of the day, and this is a more general comment in the sense that I am very cautious about this grandfather, or we want to see how everyone is spending his money. I am not such a big fan of this for the simple reason that it's my money and I spend it the way I want.
Yes.
No one should be bothered by how I'm spending my money. So let me be a bit more precise. So I'm fine with the checks when it comes to AML, that basically I am declaring that I'm earning 50K and I spend 80K on gambling. That should be a red flag, of course.
Yes, yes.
All right, that I understand, and I'm fully supportive of that because definitely I'm getting money from somewhere else which I'm not declaring. At the same time, I am not a big fan of this concept whereby I earn 50K and I raise a red flag because I spent 20K in gambling, for example. So yes, definitely it could show that there is a potential problem gambling situation there. But in my view, there should be mechanisms that try to allow the person or the immediate family members to take action, but obliging a person to stop or obliging an operator to refuse business from someone who is spending more than what he should,
Yes.
that I'm not a big fan of, because I always believe that people earn their money. If they earn it legally, they should be able to use it as they please. And unfortunately, in Europe, we're going into a situation where we have too much of this going on. We're almost giving our own independence to governments.
Yes.
In a way that governments are getting involved in our day-to-day lives, which is not good, in my opinion. And we shouldn't be happy about it.
there are many aspects of the responsible gaming regulation that look a bit like a wishful thinking of the regulator, something that is not even possible sometimes to implement in reality. Like, for example, constant checks that basically will eradicate your audience because people will not just play.
My problem is not just that. So the more you create unreasonable barriers, the more you're pushing people in underground. And this is a concept that we used to mention 18 years ago. So 18 years ago is, look, it's used as to ban online gambling, regulated, because if you're banning it, it will still exist and people will just go underground and you cannot protect them there.
Exactly.
Now, with too much regulation, the same will happen. It's like banning.
Yeah.
Because if you create too much, if the regulation is unreasonable, then operators will go underground and also players will go underground.
Yes.
If I want to spend 20,000 euros on gambling, which I don't recommend to anyone, but ultimately it's their choice, I will still spend them in somewhere or another. So I'm either going to spend them on regulated businesses and actually get the necessary protections that I need whenever I need them, or else I will just go underground where I'm not protected and I might be spending even more than that then. So I am not a big fan of overregulation at all. So I'm quite opposed to it. I always say something which doesn't sound really good from a former regulator and a regulatory lawyer. Regulation is a necessary evil. So it is necessary, but it's also, unfortunately, something that can get lost in complications in a way that it creates damage. So regulation definitely stifles a bit innovation. And at the same time, it also sometimes goes overboard and creates more problems than it solves. Magic word is balance. You have to have reasonable regulation, which is very hard to find the right balance, but you have to get as close to balance as possible, I would say.
So you are assisting clients in the UAE. How do you consider what will be the approach of the regulator in case of the UAE?
Well, we're still at initial phases. The regulations are still not public yet, so there is obviously a lot that we still need to understand. But my impression is they're taking a very positive approach, but a very professional one as well, in the sense that they are going to make sure that whoever operates there is held to very high standards. Again, it's an evolving situation. The GCGIA was set up just a bit more than 1 year ago. They gave the first license that is operational, which is the National Lottery. They gave another 2 or 3 licenses that are still not operational. So we have to see how it's going to evolve. But it is definitely a very interesting jurisdiction to keep an eye on. First of all, it's the only one in the region, and it will allow gambling. It will allow land-based online and also business-to-business gambling there. So it will be licensing business-to-business operators as well.
So it's basically a key to access to it.
Something very interesting. If you look at their website, it already mentions that in the future they might reach agreements with other countries in the region, the GCC region.
Yes.
And you will be able to passport your license across those jurisdictions. And this is something that is visible on their website, so it's public information. So that is something that if it really evolves in that way, I think this license will be very, very valuable. For now, it's going to be a very limited regime. So very few B2C license will be given out. But I trust that in the future, the jurisdiction will grow a bit more, will allow more operators to set up a shop there.
And some constraints related to the Islamic principles.
Yes, there will be some constraints. Again, the laws are not public yet, so we don't have the details of how this will be done, but definitely there are going to be some restrictions. Quite certain that it's not going to be a total restriction, and therefore it's going to be very interesting.
I remember, I guess maybe 5 years ago or something, the crypto casinos were mostly illegal.
I would say they're still, in the sense that unfortunately many gambling regulators have not adopted an approach to allow the use of crypto in gambling. We're seeing a trend towards, so Malta was the first jurisdiction, probably, I think quite certain, that was the first jurisdiction to have a comprehensive policy for the use of blockchain technology in one's gambling platform, but also for the use of cryptocurrency. I believe now that we have MiCA, which is a very interesting piece of legislation. It's the first pan-national regulatory framework that exists in the world.
Yes.
So it encompasses 27, 28 countries in it, because you have to add also EEA, but it involves the EEA, so proprietary. This framework is groundbreaking. It's always important. So, as I said, regulation is a necessary evil.
Yes.
The word necessary is very important here. And for institutional operators to be able to deal with these cryptocurrency service providers, crypto asset service providers, crypto asset service providers needed to show these institutions that they are doing things by the book. And regulation allows them to have that stamp, rubber stamp, that they are doing things by the book. So at the end of the day, I think now it will be much easier for crypto asset service providers to be able to do business with other financial institutions and be accepted more by regulators, for the simple reason that they will be in a position to show, look, I'm complying with regulations, I'm being checked constantly by a financial services authority in my country. So now you should trust me, and now you should have your mind at rest that I'm doing things as they should be. And yes, I think there are going to be more regulators around Europe that will be allowing operators to accept cryptocurrencies through MiCA licensed service providers. So this will grow the uptake of crypto, and hopefully also the evolution of blockchain in the integration of blockchain into gambling platforms, which could bring a lot of advantages for operators, players, but also regulators if they play their cards right. Because blockchain, one of its main advantages is transparency. And what does a regulator want? Transparency. So blockchain could be a winning card for the three.
And in terms of the applicability of MiCA, which is applicable, I guess, since December.
December,
yeah. So basically 20 days for now.
So no one has a MiCA license yet. Maybe a couple of big operators that were giving a MiCA license, I think in Germany. I have no idea how they managed to give a MiCA license in 15 days. I'm pretty sure that if any common person applies for a license, it would take them months to get a license. But some people managed to get it. But yes, we have a number of operators in Malta that are going to get a MiCA license very soon, because they were already on a regime that was identical to MiCA. So Malta had a framework since 2018 that was identical to MiCA.
Maltese license will take another momentum.
And we did. Last year, we had a big amount of new applications going through to get a VFA license, which was already in line with MiCA, which was actually tougher than MiCA. And now it should be very easy for them to transition into MiCA. In fact, the European Commission stated that Malta Malta, France, and Liechtenstein are the only 3 countries that can use the simplified procedure to grant the licenses, the MiCA licenses, to their operators. When you have the simplified procedure, it means that only a few formalities need to be adhered to in order to give them the license. That is why I'm quite astonished by some countries that weren't on a simplified procedure that managed to give licenses in 15 days. So, to be honest with you, I think that the operators, the normal operators, the commoners, that are not big financial institutions with a history behind them, have the ones that are based in Malta have a much bigger advantage than anyone else, and also those in Liechtenstein, of course. There's no one in France, so anyway. At the end of the day, the ones in Malta and Liechtenstein have a massive, massive advantage. And within the next 2 weeks, I'm sure we're going to see a number of operators having their license, their MiCA license granted. When this video will go out, probably we'll already have a number of them. Pretty sure this is going to be very, very fascinating for everyone.
I guess very important question is AI. AI is like the thing of the whole year of 2024, where AI is vis-a-vis the gambling industry. Is it something that we should think about in the industry?
AI has been in the gambling industry for many, many years, but no one has talked about it. Suddenly, ChatGPT came and everyone talks about AI. AI has been with us for a long time. It's just evolving and becoming better and better, that's all. But AI has been there. I've known companies in the gaming industry that have been using AI for at least 6 to 8 years now. So it's definitely not something new. What is new is how it's evolving, how much money is being put into development in AI because of the hype that was created. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot of innovation thanks to AI. Speaking of crypto and financial services, I'm pretty sure that robo-advisors are going to become better and better. And we're going to see robo-advisors managing portfolios in a much better way than any human can do. I think today the most important thing is to learn how to use AI rather than understanding AI or debating whether it's something good or bad. What we should focus on is how to use it properly. Everyone should learn how to use it properly, because the difference in the future will be made between those that know how to use AI properly and those that don't.
Maybe you have some piece of advice for them, for those who start.
When you're a startup, you are always very careful with the money, and you should be very careful with the money.
Yeah.
I'm very suspicious of those operators that start spending a lot of money in their first few years. We have the term bootstrapping, and there's a reason why we talk about bootstrapping, right? So right now, you should do bootstrapping on as much things as possible, but you also have to be careful of not being too stingy on compliance. And that means you have to get the necessary tools for compliance, and you need to get the necessary advisors for compliance. And that is something you shouldn't save too much upon. I'm not saying just go with the first that comes, but so do not try to save too much on that, because you will pay for it later on. Keeping in mind that if a scandal arises on your site, if you end up on the news, you're toast today. Like whatever happens, whatever comes out on the news will always remain there, and it will affect you for all your life. Avoid these pitfalls, and to avoid these pitfalls, you need the right tools and the right advisors.
Thank you very much. This was Joseph Borg, and I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. I hope Joseph as well. And thank you very much for your time, and I wish you best of luck on the conference.
Thank you very much.